Hello, and welcome to today's City Club of Boise program, a virtual conversation with Boise Mayor Lauren McLean. I'm Dr. Katherine Himes, City Club board member and today's moderator. This program is being delivered online, and I would like to welcome all attendees. Please note that the video and audio feeds will not be available from your computers. We will only be seeing and hearing our panelists. I want to welcome our radio listeners who will be joining us at a later date via Boise State Public Radio on KBSX 91.5 and its affiliates throughout Southern Idaho and Northern Nevada. Today's forum is available for our audience in large part because of our City Club partners and sponsors. I would like to take time to thank a few of these organizations that help us achieve our mission to ensure compelling conversations, engaged citizens, and a dynamic community. Our premier sponsor is Northwest Nazarene University and the NNU College of Business. Our annual sponsor is St. Luke's Health System. We also receive support from our forum series sponsors, AARP Idaho, Bank of Idaho, Climatech Corporation, Concordia University School of Law, Echelon Group, Micron, Pacific Source Health Plans, and Small Mine Development. City Club of Boise receives grant funding from the Idaho Humanities Council. Thanks also to our media partners, which include Boise State Public Radio, 670 KBOI, Idaho Statesman, and Idaho Public Television, and our university partners, the University of Idaho, Boise State University, and Northwest Nazarene University. Many thanks to those of you who support City Club of Boise with membership or a donation during registration. We need your help during this time of disruption. Please text the word Boise to 243-725 to make a donation in any amount, $5 or $50. It all helps to make sure we meet our budget needs. Following Mayor McLean's opening remarks, there will be an opportunity for her to respond to audience questions. You can use the Q&A feature of Zoom. Just type your question in the Q&A box, or you can email it to Morgan at cityclubofboise.org and it will be provided to me. Chat will not be enabled today. I will do my best to present each question and may group similar inquiries together in the essence of time. Now let's learn about Mayor McLean. In 2019, Lauren McLean became the first woman ever elected to the office of Boise Mayor. After graduating with honors from Notre Dame in 1997, Lauren married her high school sweetheart, Scott, and the two settled in Boise. She jumped into politics and civic engagement work while earning her MPA in environmental policy from Boise State University. In 2001, Lauren led the historic Boise Foothills Open Space Campaign. In 2011, Lauren was appointed to Boise City Council, was twice reelected, and served as council president. On the weekends, Lauren McLean is an avid trail runner, backpacker, and skier. Most days she can be spotted running on Boise's foothills trails and biking to City Hall. When she was sworn in on January 7th, 2020, no one knew that a global pandemic would threaten lives, jobs, and families. Mayor McLean and her team at the City of Boise have been diligently working, not just leading this crisis response, preparedness, and recovery, but on all the issues that Boiseans made clear were necessary to tackle as our community grows. After conversations with thousands of Boise residents, Mayor McLean's priorities for the coming years include an increased commitment to transparency, accountability, and accessibility as residents seek to engage with City Hall, a renewed sense of urgency in addressing our city's growing affordability crisis, housing shortages and homelessness, building new regional relationships at every level of government and business to work toward an actionable plan for valley transportation, and finally, climate innovation to set the stage for economic opportunity and provide equitable access to the benefits of clean energy. Mayor McLean, please, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thanks, Katherine, so much. It's really nice to be here with all of you. First off, I want to say that I have long been a member of, I'm afraid that mine might have lapsed actually in this last couple of months. I got to catch up with that. But long been a member of City Club because I so enjoy it being a place where we can come together, have discourse deliberatively, engage people, as you said, and learn together as we think about what our community, nation, and world needs to move us forward. And it's really fun and an honor to be here for the first time as mayor, although I really do wish that we were in person, as we all do. So I have to say, for full disclosure, so it didn't feel weird that I was just talking to a little camera, I've asked members of my team to join me today. So I have my Chief of Staff, Courtney Washburn, and Director of Community Engagement, Maria Wieg, with me. So you'll probably see me looking at them and smiling occasionally, just to feel like we have community as we speak about the topics at hand. I'm going to be brief because this is about conversation, and happy to take questions and even comments from people. But you know, as was said, when I was sworn in as the 56th mayor of Boise, never did I imagine, nor did any of us imagine, that what 2020 would become is what we have now, where we're having to address an unprecedented global crisis here that has extreme repercussions here at home, that we have to take actions to protect our health while figuring out how we recover economically in the long run. But what I want to say is that I have been so inspired and energized by what I see daily, and that is that Boiseans have been willing to come together, make personal sacrifices to protect the health of others, and while you're experiencing unprecedented hardship, and you're engaging in conversations that we're being called upon to have as we think about and talk about and plan for public safety and our nation's history of racism, all within 6 months. And what Boiseans have shown is that we are engaged community, committed to creating a place for everyone that welcomes all and creating opportunity for all of us, our children, and theirs. And I firmly believe that in these challenges, there's so much opportunity for us to rebuild in stronger and safer ways, and to become a more resilient and prepared community for the challenges ahead. And so I just say that, week after week, as we think about where we are today and where we know we need to head, that week after week in the conversations I've had in the last year, in the conversations I have today, despite the crisis at hand, I remain committed to the priorities that the city has, the priorities that brought me to this office. And that is in my belief that we will create opportunity for everyone in a stronger community when we do address affordable housing, when we do address transportation and climate innovation. And now more than ever, and you'll see in my budget, or if you haven't already, please take a look because we're having a hearing on Tuesday, that these priorities are at the center of the work that we're doing, as we also, at the same time, take the tough steps that we have to as a community to protect our public health. Because as leaders, whether it be company leaders or hospital leaders, after leaders within our community say, our long-term resilience and success and ability to recover stronger is all tied to people, which is all tied to health. And so the last 6 months have been incredible, working with incredible residents who are committed to Boise and tackling the issues that nobody ever imagined we'd have, but at the end of the day, remaining very focused, singularly focused on making sure that the actions that we take as City Hall, in conjunction with the public, are those that will address the challenges at hand and ensure that at the end of the day, we have a community for everyone. And with that, I'd love to, I'm looking down at you because my computer's here. I'm supposed to look here. I'm happy to take questions, love to hear comments. This is as valuable as for me as it is for everyone else. It's a great way to connect and get a sense of what people are thinking about.
Thanks so much, Mayor. People are really interested in your first 6 months. How have they been? Certainly when you won the election, when you started thinking about what were those top line items, it's been so different. And so people really are curious
about what those 6 months have been like.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting because in some ways I think about it in terms of pre-COVID, post-COVID, but it all comes together. And so at the early days, I was focused on what anyone starting a new job would be focused on. And that was building a team, making sure that we had the right people in place and that we were generating as many ideas and being as responsive to the community as we could be to make good on the promises that the people of Boise expected and made clear were important to them on the issues that I mentioned. And then while doing that, in the early days of this year, we in some ways had to pivot, but I really believe it comes back together, to pivot, to think about how, as a city government, we do business differently. I did have to learn about and address issues that never in my wildest dreams that I imagined I'd be learning about or addressing when it comes to public health and pandemics, and ultimately take steps that I believed were incredibly important for both the moment in time for our community, but also for the long-term resilience of our community. And that is taking steps sometimes before others were willing to protect public health, and recognizing that in my belief that this is all about people and being responsive to the community and leading with a mind towards service, that if I didn't take care of people first and do what needed to be done to protect our health and those most vulnerable among us, and then all the other things that we need to do in the long run to create a city for everyone would be for naught. And so it's been tough, but it's been tough for all of us in these last 6 months. And at the same time, an incredible honor to be in this place and to be challenged to come up with solutions, whether it be for the most vulnerable populations in our homeless residents, for businesses that are seeking relief. And in many ways, just being present and willing to hear from residents about their needs in these tough times.
Thanks, Mayor. We have several questions related to city budgeting. People are really interested. How do you decide what to cut, what to keep? Who is involved? Are community members engaged in the process? How do you determine priorities? So I think we're looking for a city budgeting 101, 201 type of answers.
City budgeting 101, 201. The most important part is, I would say, to know your values, understand your priorities, and then to have a great budget team that can make that happen in conjunction with engaging the public. So this budget year has been different because traditionally we would be gathering weekly as a city council, hearing from departments on their priorities, addressing new programs that needed to be addressed, and then moving forward that way with like widespread in-person, face-to-face community engagement was truly my goal, and remains my commitment around budgeting in general. This year, we did a couple things. First off, for the first time in many, many years, we recognized how important it was to take 0% increase in property taxes when traditionally the city takes 3%. I came into this role asking staff to look at lower numbers because I recognize that the city plays a role in affordability. And before this crisis, residents were loud and clear that housing affordability was impacting their lives. And so I asked staff to look at that. And then we have to make priority judgments. Right away, staff worked with me to find several $1 million worth of savings in just the way we do business here. So be more efficient, so that would create room for new programs that would address the opportunities and that we're ahead when we look at economic development, climate and clean energy, and of course my priorities around increasing our engagement in affordable housing. As this progressed, and then we were in pandemic mode, and we recognized that we're going to go with 0%, but also budgets are reflections of values and priorities. And so staff has been willing and worked hard to help make it possible for us to respond to the needs that are highlighted even more now in the pandemic than before, to make sure that we can still invest in affordable housing while not increasing property taxes. And that requires a team of people that are willing to look at what we've done and don't need to do any longer and what we should be doing now. We're making investments. I'm so excited in climate innovation because that is key to our long-term economic success, but also as we move into a clean energy world, it saves our residents money. And of course, with COVID, we've had to create a reserve that will allow us to address dire community need as we experience that need. I have an amazing team of people here at the city working with other agencies that stood up programs to support those experiencing homelessness, that acquired places where we could help isolate those without homes if they got sick. And all of that is part of our city budget now because of the work that our team has been willing to do to be smart fiscally, to save money where we can, and then put investments where we must to move us forward.
Thanks, Mary. You touched on this a little bit in your answer, but there are a couple questions related to housing affordability. Specifically, what is the city's plan to increase low-cost housing? How does the city plan to take care of a wave of homelessness?
So I really appreciate that you address both at the same time, because many people will say, what are you going to do to address homelessness? What are you doing? What are you doing? And as I've often said, we have to look at the system of how we're making sure that there's a home for everyone and everyone's different budgets in our city to prevent homelessness. And so as a city, what we're doing is early on, I think it was February, March, we made an investment to address those experiencing homelessness first, that part of the question. We made an investment to make good on my belief that you need to connect services with those who are experiencing homelessness to help them move into shelter and then into home. And so partnering with Catch, we've developed a street team that provides services to those who need it with the intent of moving people into shelter. We, in this budget that we'll have a hearing on Tuesday, we've proposed an eviction prevention fund that will make sure that people currently housed have the support they need to stay housed. And that both addresses housing, but also prevents additional homelessness in our community. And then we have been acquiring property throughout the city to build out a housing land bank or a housing land trust, people call it different things, where the city has property that we can then encourage developments that include all different elements and prices of housing within that development. And a great example of that is the announcement we made around Franklin and Orchard. So you'll see in the 2021 budget that we've drastically increased the amount of funding as well as the amount of time and energy we're putting in to address homelessness and housing for everyone.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, you touched on this in that first question around the city and the budget, but this is really around opportunities for jumpstarting change, specifically making 8th Street more walkable, reimagining transit, and thinking about how vacancies downtown might change what the city core is. We're all working differently, and what does that mean with parking, working from home, so forth?
Sorry. I'm looking at you. Was that it? I was saying yes, but I didn't mean to cut you off if I was.
No, that was the question.
Okay. You know, somebody said, I can't remember who now, like never let a good crisis or a good challenge go to waste. And it is so important that we recognize in these really tough times that our community was able to change the way they work, change the way they commute, and even change the way they interact with businesses much more quickly than we ever imagined possible, because we had to. We knew that it was what we had to do to protect the health of our community, and we all share the belief that that will make it possible to recover in the long run. But we also understand that life will be different. And so it is important to reimagine what downtown looks like, to reimagine what going to work looks like. And then as a city, I often will challenge our team to think about what that means when it comes to reimagining how we provide services, but also the solutions that we offer to the community. And this is a time that really demands of us to be less risk averse, to try things and recognize they might not necessarily be perfect or work, and we might have to try something else instead. But that's what we've had to do to protect public health. And we're learning as we go through what works and what doesn't. 8th Street was a great example of something that happened quickly. I think it was 3 weeks between when we brought up the idea and we actually made it happen. And it's that speed of things that is important whenever we can, that we take on, we try. And we had to iterate. It came together, and then members of the community worked with the city and the businesses to kind of improve it a little bit. And we really wanted to do the same thing in other parts of our city to support businesses where over 100 have asked for similar partnership. And what's really exciting is that just this week we met with the Highway District, and together we're going to make more things like that happen where we can.
Great, thank you. Let's switch a little bit to public health. We, as you can probably imagine, have received a lot of questions related to COVID. Some of these questions have to do with the balance between personal freedom and healthcare, really thinking about individualism versus group. Another question has to do with balance of local decisions, local policies, and state level policies. And then finally, several questions, really passionate questions related to education and school safety. And any thoughts on what fall return might mean for K through 12 in Boise?
All right. Yeah, there's a lot there. So if it's okay, I will kind of address some of that, but then COVID and public health and the role of the city in general, if that works. First off, I'll address local government versus state or federal. Boiseans understand that we need and we must have coordinated efforts to protect our health and then ultimately to help our economy recover. In an ideal world, we'd see that at the national level. We'd be called upon to make sacrifices. We'd be called upon to see this as the challenge of our generation and to respond accordingly, to protect our families, to protect our neighbors, and to create progress for our communities and our country. And that's largely fallen on governors and local officials. And I'm really honored to be part of a new program that's been put on by the Harvard Kennedy School and the Harvard Business School. They accepted 40 mayors into a U.S. Recovery Leadership Institute. And we were coming together and learning about what it will take to get cities to recover, but also at the same time, how we protect public health, because so many of these decisions have been pushed down to the local level. Boiseans recognize that everything we do is a balance of freedom and that responsibility that comes with it. And it is not a matter of personal choice when it comes to, and often people will talk about, I'm looking at my mask, people will talk about masks. Well, I feel healthier without one. The things that we're asking our residents to do will protect them because it protects other people. And when I had to make the tough call to require masks in the city, it's because CEOs of companies were saying it was the only way to make sure we could stay back to work. Public health leaders and hospital leaders were saying it was the only thing we could do absent closing down again to try to curb the spread. To enjoy the freedoms that we have in this country, we have to be responsible to the impact that our actions have. And I have been incredibly inspired by the willingness of Boiseans to mask up. The understanding that it's not to protect them, but it's to protect the other person. And in protecting your neighbor, their choice to do the same protects you. And we need that so that we can stay back to work, and also so that we can get back to school. And in talking with the school district about their plans and in hearing from so many parents worried and kids wanting to get back into the classroom, it's become even more apparent that cities and local officials need to partner with schools to make sure that we're doing everything we can and making those tough calls, which sometimes results in protests and pushback, to protect the health of everyone so that we can educate our kids, so we can get back to work, and we need to do it together. And when that happens, then we have the freedom that we all enjoy, which is the freedom to create opportunity and to build a life for ourselves and to create a better life for our children after us.
Thanks, Mayor. Can you speak a little bit to the questions around opening of schools in the fall, what that might look like?
So I want to be clear on that. I've got kids. I'd really like them back to school. My daughter leaves for college in a couple weeks, and she'd like to be back at school. The school districts have worked hard on plans for both online education and in-person education. And as with everything during the time of COVID, it really requires us to partner to make for the district to work with the cities, to work with the health officials, to work with the state to make sure that we're all doing what we need to do to get kids back to school. And so while they're making those calls on what it looks like, I do want the public to understand that we are talking with them and working with them and really thinking about the policies we need to have in place at the city level to make it most likely that our kids can get back to the classroom. And the single most important thing you can do if you want to see your kids back in the classroom is to put that mask on, everyone, so that we can curb the spread and move onward.
Thank you. Let's move in another direction. This is the transition reports. There are several questions here, some from supporters. They say, I probably voted for Mayor McLean, but really interested in how these transition reports came about. What was your intent? How will they be used? Do they guide policy? What was the level of community engagement and so forth?
Sure. All great questions. And first off, I should say the transition is over. 6 months into this, we are well beyond transition reports, very focused on passing the budget that we've recommended that demonstrates the priorities that I have and making good on the promises that Boiseans called on us to make good on. But they were an example of like American government at work when you have a change of administrations where citizens come together and generate ideas. And what I asked of our citizens who we invited to join various different transition committees was that they be creative. And this was the first opportunity we've had in nearly 2 decades to imagine what a city for everyone looks like. And so I wanted to hear from people from all walks of life with different expertise areas on different committees, what they thought that was. And then it's my job as mayor to take it all in, to even better understand where various people in our community are coming from and the ideas they have, than I did before the election, and then to make the tough calls around the priorities that remain the priorities that I came to office with. And you'll see in the budget, you know, what from various transition committees will be coming to be. And much of that centers around my belief that the key to long-term economic prosperity and opportunity in our community is to address climate and clean energy, affordable housing, the creation of more jobs, and ways to connect people with those.
Thank you. And how would you respond to someone who says that those transition reports were unvetted?
Unvetted. I would say that not quite sure what they mean by that, but what I will say about our philosophy of transition, as with my philosophy of government, is that listening to everyone means listening to people you might not agree with. Transparency means showing what you've been provided and sharing that with the public so that the public understands what I've heard and who was on those reports. And then ultimately being clear in how I make decisions and prioritize the needs of this community, all of which right now especially center around public health, economic recovery, and the tools to do that.
Thank you, Mayor. There are, of course, questions about policing. People are interested in how the new police chief was selected.
Sure. So Chief Ryan Lee, I think will make history in terms of being the first chief selected in Boise who was interviewed through a Zoom interview twice, because the first time I interviewed the first round of candidates was my first day of doing Zoom. And it just felt so funny. So then I did a second round of interviews when I was more comfortable talking to a camera rather than a face. But that process to choose a chief of police started back in October, was paused during the election, included more community panels than in the past. We added one more panel because I wanted to get more people engaged. And then after some people actually got to meet him in person in January, quite a few candidates came to Boise and were interviewed. And those folks that did that in-person interviewing whittled it down to 4 who were scheduled to come and visit for interviews. But because of COVID, we ended up doing it remotely. And so after I interviewed 4 finalists from the first round of interviews, 2 of the finalists moved into community interviews that were also done through Zoom and other panels. And then I interviewed the final 2 again and ultimately selected Ryan as our chief of police.
How many community members were involved in this process?
Oh, you know what? That's a great question. I don't know the number of people. I think the first round of interviews included council leadership, others in the law enforcement fields and the legal fields, some city staff and department heads. I'm trying to think, I'm looking at people, maybe 8 or 10 were in that first round. Then I had interviews, and then we had 3 community panels that had 8 to 12 folks in it. It followed the format that they always have followed here. However, we added an additional community panel. And typically, had we all been able to come together, they were actually scheduled to be in Boise the first week of April. So it was a week and a half, 10 days after the shutdown. And so we had originally scheduled a community event, like a social, so that people could meet the 2 finalists as well as those community panels. And instead, we just did the community panels through Zoom.
Thank you. Another question related to policing, and I'm going to read parts of it verbatim. Vigils, protests, counter-protests, policing, what you would like to see going forward. This person feels that there needs to be separation between escalating groups and for those who don't have weapons to feel safe when there are people present with weapons, as well as to make it safe for people of color and those who support them to express their needs. So the question really is, what are the limitations of your power to change and to articulate the needs that have become clear to you and how you plan to address them?
Sure. I share the concern and the belief that anyone practicing their right to assemble and to speak is correct in expecting that they will be able to do it peacefully and also to be protected in the event that things escalate. I'll address the Tuesday night, it was the 30th of June, where things didn't happen that way. Our new chief of police was sworn in the next morning, and we spoke that next morning about how the city would handle this moving forward. And I believe just today, the police department released some of their plan for creating separation between groups, allowing to ensure that we do all we can to make people feel safe as they're gathering and protesting. So I'd encourage folks to look online, either through Facebook or Twitter, or just at the City of Boise website under police to see what was released today by Chief Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask a follow-up, which is really your own view on this. Has it been impacted by the events of the past few months? That was the second part of this question.
I came to this office and to my role in public service as an advocate first, and my sense of the rights of people to assemble and speak, the rights of people to advocate for the policies and solutions that they will believe will bring progress in a community are paramount. And the vigil itself was an incredible testament to the people of Boise responding to the organizers asking for people to come in peace and to pay their respects to people that had died unjustly. I was there, it was beautiful. It left a mark on me. What we have seen in the growing escalation and protests, I believe, is not, there's no room for violence. There's room for peaceful gathering and speaking one's truths. And my belief in that, my steadfast belief in that, has not changed, even as I've seen what's happened. What has changed is my understanding of what the police could, should, and must do to prepare for changes in an environment, and then ultimately be solely focused on protecting those who've gathered.
Thanks, Mayor. There are some questions around unemployment and small businesses in Boise, I think particularly connected to the pandemic. And what is the city's plan for support? What are you hearing in City Hall in terms of needs? How can the community be engaged?
Thank you. Businesses have really suffered, and what that means is that people that own them and their families, people that are employed by them and their families are having a really tough time. When we shut down as a community, I expected, as did others, that those systems in place at the state and federal level to support workers, would be smooth. And what we saw instead was that it wasn't, because of the onslaught of need. As a city, our hands are often tied in terms of, and they are tied in terms of policies or the handouts from the CARES package that has gone to the state. We don't have those tools. But what we do have is the ability to convene people and chart a plan to ensure that our business community, our community in general, recovers. And that takes cooperation from all levels of businesses and individuals who are committed to helping make it happen. You pointed out 8th Street. That is a way that our city can help businesses, is to help them work through the puzzle of different levels of government to create outdoor space for their businesses. And we're launching, we will be launching an economic recovery plan that right now we've convened a task force to help us think through the questions that we ought to ask, the direction that we should take in that. And then we'll be looking to the public to engage. We want to hear from small business owners, workers, artists, others, because all together we create a community, but also the economy that is Boise. And so we will need you, and please stay tuned, because late summer, early fall, there'll be opportunities to engage.
Great. You mentioned these opportunities for engagement, specifically around this recovery plan. What are some other actions that Boiseans can take on a daily basis to support small businesses and help other Boiseans?
Great question. That's something that I really believe Boiseans do so well, is that we've shown through this that we are willing to take actions. I'm going to start with the most obvious, or it should be, is wear your mask. As you support those businesses, as you get out for some fresh air, because if we can curb this together, we will be able to recover more quickly and more strongly. Of course, support local. The city has had great partnerships with Downtown Boise Association, with neighborhoods, with businesses throughout the city that are trying to figure out how they provide services to their residents. And when you're thinking about buying a book, buying anything else you need, Google a local store first to see if you can do curbside pickup before you jump on and order it to have it delivered to your house nationally. No, it's really about being intentional right now in terms of how we spend our dollars, but then also there are so many people in need, and more and more organizations, as they reopen, are looking for volunteers. And this is really an instance where Boiseans rolling up their sleeves, figuring out how to get engaged, maybe in something you never thought you'd be involved in, because of the crisis we're experiencing as a community, will make a big difference in the long run.
Thanks for answering the question about volunteering. I hadn't posed it yet, but it had come in from an audience member. Let's shift a little bit to comprehensive plans and growth. People, of course, always want to talk about growth in the Treasure Valley. And does that feed into the comprehensive plans? Is the comprehensive plan still on track? What does that process look like?
Sure. We are still focused on implementing the comprehensive plan that citizens helped write. When was it? And probably 10, 15 years ago. There's also the zoning rewrite that I think some people are curious about. And that we'll actually be talking with City Council, if not this coming week, then the week after, about the next steps moving forward on that. I would say a couple things on growth. Many of the issues that were important issues during this election, many of the issues that I'm focused on, are in many ways tied to growth, because we saw unprecedented growth in our community pre-COVID. And I, as many in this community, believe that we won't necessarily see that slow down as people realize that this is an incredible place to live in times of uncertainty. So focusing on our zoning changes to make sure that we can have housing that's affordable for everyone in walkable neighborhoods that support businesses because they're dense enough is going to be important. It's in our comp plan. It'll be part of our zoning ordinance rewrite as we move forward.
And how does transportation feed into all this, whether it's roads or public transportation? What's the connection there with the comprehensive plan as well as growth?
Sure. It's incredibly important as we grow that we make certain that our infrastructure keeps up with growth, and that is transportation as well. There are many people in this community that have said that they weren't able to reach jobs that would have provided more opportunity than they had because of the lack of transit. And so I am committed, remain committed to making sure that we have an actionable plan that envisions and then makes possible action around regional transit to connect people from home to work. But right now, we were talking earlier about reimagining things. COVID has created new problems or like new concerns that we have to address, and that is that people are less likely, if they have the choice, to jump on a bus than they were before because of the virus. So transit in many ways has to reimagine itself, how the buses interact and do business with people, and we're going to have to look at where we have those lines as we're looking, you know, as we're experiencing lower revenues. But we importantly need to also think about different ways to connect people. Like mobility is key, and investing in more bike lanes, investing in pathways, thinking about how the canals could potentially connect people from home to work and everywhere in between is an important piece of that puzzle right now, as fewer people might be willing to jump on a bus. And in our 2021 budget, we actually have the beginnings of a pathways plan to help guide our actions to build out mobility through neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mayor. There are a series of questions on collaboration. One of them is describe the relationship you have with Governor Little.
Okay, that's it. Okay, I wasn't. I was ready for a list to try to remember them all.
No, I'll give you a few more.
Great. You know, I feel really grateful for the relationship that I have with Governor Little. Our staff communicate often, and he and I connect quite a bit as well. And it probably forged more quickly than it would have otherwise had we not been in crisis. So when I was having to think forward in March about the decisions I needed to make, that I knew that were, you know, I could make and believed I needed to make to protect the health of our residents, the governor and I and our teams were in constant communication about who was doing what, when, and what it looked like. And we've had those conversations as well as our community has moved through the vigil and the protests, et cetera, to talk about how we work together to keep our public safe. And you know, he's right up the street, and we are the capital city, and that close relationship between the two government entities, the two buildings, is really important to me, and I appreciate the partnership we've had.
Thank you. Talk about your relationship with the mayors of Meridian, Garden City, and Eagle. People are really interested in how you work together, how you make this a seamless area.
Sure. And that's a really key word, and is recognizing that this valley really is a seamless area. And I'd say it goes beyond those that were mentioned. It really is the two counties where mayors need to work together. It's because people are moving back and forth between them. Again, I think that we all met each other sooner, faster, and in more intense situations than we would have otherwise, because there are several of us that are new. And while we may disagree on different issues or who takes action and when they take action, ultimately, all of us are coming together twice a week right now to review what's happening in our valley, to talk about solutions, and then who's doing what. And I expect to see the relationships that we've forged through that, and the understanding that we've gained of each other, where we're different, and also where we have similar shared values and goals, will do us all well in the long run as we think about this one region together as the capital region and the economy that we all want to see recover and thrive.
What are some collaborations that you're engaged in or the city of Boise is involved with that may just not be on people's radars yet?
That's a great question. And it's actually somewhat fun to step back and think about that, because it feels like we're not collaborating all that much because we don't have people right next to us, right? But we're doing this, and there's actually quite a bit of collaborating that comes from like sitting down, zooming in, and then seeing 10 people on a screen. I'm going to highlight first the collaboration that came to be to support our most vulnerable populations as we were planning for COVID. We knew in the early days of March that we were going to have to take action and shut down the city, but that also we needed to ensure that we had the systems in place to support those most vulnerable in our community. And our city team came together with the shelters, came together with service providers to line out, the needs that might be out there, and then to build plans to be able to serve the need. And that included working with the school district to make sure that food was being distributed in effective ways and reaching those who needed it. Working with shelters to move those most vulnerable, the medically fragile and families out of shelters and into hotel rooms, so then there were more beds for those experiencing homelessness and still on the streets. And then creating space where if people got sick that needed to isolate could go. And that was an incredible partnership, and I was so proud of city staff and the service providers in this community and the agencies in this region that helped make that possible. We've partnered with the U.S. Council of Mayors to distribute masks throughout the city. And of course, now I'm working with the Brookings Institute and Sightline Institute and a host of university leaders and business leaders to develop economic recovery plan. The task force has come together to kind of help chart that. We've worked with the faith community to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the people that they know need things. And we are, of course, you saw the Housing Franklin and Orchard project that I'd actually call collaboration because it was our land. And we're doing more of those in the months and weeks to come.
Thanks, Mayor. We're interested in learning what you think makes a great leader. Do you have any role models, any qualities that are very important to you in the way you comport yourself?
That's a good question. I think that there are leaders throughout this community. You could be a leader of your block, be a leader of your neighborhood, of your church, of your Girl Scout troop. And ultimately, I would say that leaders at all levels need to have and often demonstrate their willingness to make decisions or make suggestions depending on their role that might be counter to what you've heard before, to demonstrate that they have a set of values and a fortitude or strength of character that allows them to move through tough times and stay true to those. And from a political and kind of corporate perspective too, I think leaders must feel comfortable in this middle space when people from all walks of life are asking things of you that you can't necessarily deliver on, but by taking all of that in, you can make decisions and are comfortable and willing to make decisions guided by that. And in this pandemic, I would say more than ever, it's become clear that leaders must be willing to make decisions that place people at the center, and to make those decisions even knowing that the political consequences might be other than what they would like, because the most important thing is protecting our communities and the people that live in them.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to shift again, and this has to do with the recall effort. The leaders of the recall effort are saying you're governing differently than you said you would during your campaign. How do you answer this? And coupled with that, what are you doing to promote accessibility, transparency, and equity?
Sure. Well, first off, I would say I don't know these folks that have launched this recall effort, and I remain singularly focused on what brought me to office. And while I don't know who they are, I do know that the people of Boise elected me with a job in mind. And that was that I would do everything I could day by day to protect what is so special about this place and this community that we all hold dear. And the people of Boise knew when they voted twice that I would bring to this office a willingness to listen, a deep-seated belief that engagement in the community and connecting with people is key to a vibrant place and to generating the ideas that move communities forward. And I'm not going to be distracted by something that's designed to divide or distract. at a time now when it requires me to lead in a way that we didn't envision, and that is to address the crisis brought on by a pandemic and the economic fallout because of it. And so I remain day by day focused on the job that I have, and that is protecting this place, protecting our people, and moving this city forward at a time that we are being called on to address so much more than we could have imagined being called on to address.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to shift now to several different questions, but I think that they're really connected to the health of our community, the health of democracy. The first is, what are you doing to address institutional racism in the community?
So to address our nation's history of racism requires all of us to step into spaces that aren't necessarily comfortable, to listen to those that we wouldn't historically perhaps run into or listen to ask questions about what's happened in our country over the last 200 years with an open heart and open mind. Here at the city of Boise, we've talked about before the crisis and the clarion call that came to be because of George Floyd's death. We talked about the importance of placing equity at the center of the action we do, because whatever you're thinking about, access to economic opportunity, access to the benefits of clean energy, access to education, and all these different things must be equitable. And here at the city, it's our role to examine our own processes and figure out internally how we create environments where all are welcome, and once they're here, all want to stay, to help us serve our community by being more reflective of the community here at Boise. And I'd say in the last couple weeks, especially, I want the public to know that I step into the conversations that are being had. I joined a town hall the other night that was organized by a group of people in our community, because I want to hear the experiences of others. I want to hear so that I could not fully understand, but better understand what it is that I can do as a leader to help move us forward in partnership with all members of this community. And on the state of democracy, I actually would like, here I am looking at you again, I'm supposed to look here. You mentioned that because I think in the same question you talked about like public health and the health of our democracy. In any democracy, there is an expectation that citizens be engaged. And it's not always, it's messy. People from different walks of life with different political backgrounds, with different life experiences and very different expectations need to be involved and need to be engaged. And it works when we're willing to come together, whether it be through Zoom or around a table when we can, look each other in the eye, have tough conversations, acknowledge each other with respect, and then recognize that this is the magic of this place where we roll up our sleeves and come up with the best solutions that create opportunity for everyone, regardless of what they look like, who they come, where they come from, who they love, etc. And it's, Boise's people love doing that, exercising our rights to engage, to have like really important conversations, make tough decisions, and try to move us forward. And that's at the core of what like local and democratic governance calls on us to do. And while there's a lot of talk nationally and concerns about where we are in terms of like democratic health right now, I see this pandemic again as highlighting the pandemic, the economic impact it's had on our people around this country, is highlighting those inequities and really highlighting how important it is that we do what we're supposed to do in a democracy, and that is engage, speak our truths, come up with solutions to move us forward.
Thank you. And looking forward to the elections, there are several questions.
They seem so far away.
Yes, they do. These
but they aren't.
No, they have to do with what is the city planning? How is the city going to make sure that people are able to vote, given all that's happening with economic challenges, with the pandemic, How are you going to make sure that we have transparency and the elections are accessible and that there's equitable opportunity to vote?
I appreciate that question. The city doesn't administer elections. That's the county and the state in terms of different levels. But what I can say as mayor is that I'm committed to ensuring that we do what we can and need to do to work with the county to make sure that people are able to vote safely in healthy ways, and if not, to advocate for doing it in safer ways, such as remotely and by absentee, as we did in the spring. I know that our clerk's office and the county clerk's office talk often about all things electoral, and we partner with them where we must. But ultimately, the thing that I can do with my team here at the City of Boise is focus on protecting the health of our people so that we can get back to the business of going to school and doing everything else, but then also vote safely.
Thank you. As you think about the next year, if we were together again in July of 2021, what would you like to have accomplished by that time?
I get a big smile on my face because I really hope we can just have a big giant community party before July of 21, because I just miss seeing everybody so much, and coming together in spirit but also in body is so important for the city. In the coming year, I intend to accomplish, first and foremost, I should say it's background. I will make the decisions I must to protect the health of our people. So that's going to be like right parallel alongside everything else that I want to accomplish, which has to do with running a city, connecting with community as much as possible, and making true on the promise that we're going to recover. And with that comes a dedicated focus to expanding out our housing land trust and the housing that's affordable and available in our community. Working with business leaders and the universities to make sure that we're leaving no stone unturned when it comes to creating programs, opportunities, investments that will help grow the economy. And then later today, there'll be an announcement around some climate action work we intend to take, because as I've said, clean energy and climate preparedness is at the center of long-term economic opportunity. And so a year from now, I expect to be looking back and talking about the advancements we've made to meet our clean energy goals, to adapt to climate, and to be more resilient in the long run as a community.
Thanks, Mayor. I have one more question, and then there's time for you to cover other topics that we didn't reach during this conversation, or deliver some sort of closing as you wish. My final question, I know you love trails. It was in your bio. I've seen you on the trails. I was on the trails this morning as well, and I was thinking about Boise and place, and I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. What do you feel about Boise? What about this place is so special to you?
So I'm glad that you got to be out there, Katherine, this morning, because I was supposed to be out there this morning, and then I woke up to find that I had no running shoes in my house, because in the last couple of weeks I've managed to bring them all here and not take any home. I was so frustrated. I am on the trails close to daily, and I will say that I still remember, you've all heard the story, but I still remember when I first flew into Boise for the first time. And it was in March of '98. I was super young. Scott and I had just gotten married, and seeing the foothills just struck me to my core from the sky. And then I went and found them. And I deeply believe, because I feel it, that people and community are rooted in place. Community is rooted in place, community is rooted in people. But the place that we have is singular. And whether it be folks this morning that posted that they were up in the pictures of the comet above the hills when they were up there in the dark, seeing families and others wandering the greenbelt and now creating little beach spots to enjoy the clean water. And it restores us all, but it also unites us all because we are grounded in the place that we've chosen to live. And I think while it restores us, it unites us, it also strengthens us. And strengthens me personally and gives me much more resolve to stay focused on what we have to do as a community now. And maybe this is my final remarks, which is come together and recognize that the next year, 18 months are going to be hard, as they've been hard the last 6 months. It requires of us to have more patience and this longer view than we often do. It requires of us to think about what can be and will be different, and bring ideas to the table to address today's challenges that are really real, but prepares us for the future. And this place inspires me to do that. It gives me energy to do it when these days are really tough, as all of you know. But most importantly, the people of our place inspire me, encourage me, and remind me of what a special place we live, and a unique and singular community we've all built together.
Please join me in thanking Mayor Lauren McLean for participating in today's City Club of Boise Forum. Thank you, Mayor. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.